And basically she tried to play the battered woman syndrome with Oprah. He forced me to do this, and I'm trying to do better, and you're not supposed to hate, but I hate her.
No, but
it's just one of those things. If she walked by.
Warning. The podcast you're about to listen to may contain graphic descriptions of violent assaults, murder, and adult language. Listener discretion is advised.
Murdered in Their Home, The Brutal Killing of Edwin and Bessie Morris, Part 2 of 3.
Once the description came, we didn't know they'd murdered our grandparents, but one of the names was Roger Dale Epperson. The Epperson name in our family meant a lot because my grandfather's best friend was Epperson, which he was honorary pallbearer at my grandfather's funeral, and his son is the one that murdered my grandparents.
You're kidding.
So when they went to start questioning Ebb about Roger's involvement in the Acker case, Ebb kind of was like, I don't know. And the detective kept pushing and pushing. And he said, do you know anything else? And he said, I think he may have killed my best friend.
Oh.
How did they come about finding those three after the doctor woke up?
Well, that gets interesting. The manhunt started. Once they explained that to the detective, he came to us, then we're like, no doubt that's who did it. There was a phone call that was made a week before that we think they cased out the place. They came by to look at it, but it was a bunch of kids there too on a Saturday afternoon. So we think they didn't do it that time. And then they were a little loose with their money. They gave some to some people there nearby. They decided they were going to travel straight to Florida. So they were headed down to Florida. They stopped in Atlanta a couple of times, showed some money, and gave what they in my grandparents' case, they got a big diamond ring. My grandmother had one big diamond ring and a couple other things. They pawned a few things, but the diamond ring comes into play much later. But that came up, we found in the murder trial on the mother of Mr. Epperson. His mom was wearing my grandmother's wedding ring, which caused a lot of trouble that day. That was an interesting time. But so they got involved in that. They had Roger Epperson in Atlanta back in April had skipped on an assault charge. So they were looking for him then. Lester T. Burns at the time was the Johnny Cochran of Kentucky lawyers. If you were guilty of something or a defendant, you wanted Lester to be your attorney. Once they got arrested, Lester was actually helping them launder some of the money. They wanted to get some of the money gone. So he ended up getting disbarred, served prison time for it. They went to Florida, were partying, had a boat set up to take them out of the country and was going to be great. They'd got a couple of girlfriends. Sherry was Hodge's girlfriend. They met this other group that was partying pretty hard with some cocaine and decided, you know what? We'll leave tomorrow. Don't worry about it. And so they partied that night, and at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, the FBI kicked the door down and arrested them then and then extradited them back, and then that's when our whole process started.
So did they find out who these were because the doctor knew them and the doctor told
Once
them?
the doctor described and then word got out, everybody knew who it was.
Everybody said, well, it has to be this
They had
person.
met with an individual, not the best individual there in Letcher County, and he's like, well, they talked to me about maybe doing something to him. And then, this one said, well, yeah, they wanted to borrow this from me to do that part of it, or they wanted to see if I could help them with a car that looked like a cop car, and everything started piecing together. And even then, now we have CSI's TV where you can find everything. Back then, DNA wasn't around. You didn't have, all that forensic stuff to do. You had to, like old school, you had to actually dig and find stuff. And what was up, beat your feet,
Yes.
hoofs on the ground to try to figure it all out.
And that's actually still true, despite all the advances, DNA, cell phones, the genealogy,
GPS on the
tracking
where you're
that,
going.
that's all
right.
great. But we emphasize over and over when we interview detectives on here that people have to talk. That stuff means you have to have a story to get you to look at that stuff.
Well, and it's still, I can't imagine now trying to convict people because they expect you to have everything they do on TV.
Yes,
well, they did that in 40 minutes. They had it all solved, and you had this, and this. Well, that guy didn't have that. How come this is there? And it even came up in our case. One of the overturns was over a hair sample.
Yeah,
that was found 20-some years later. But it's just, the old school ways when it comes to that still apply. But sometimes you have to have common sense to make it work too.
That's a good point. Common sense.
So they were going to leave.
They were leaving the country.
If they had left that night, they
were
would
gone.
not been caught.
We probably never,
Unless somebody
we knew
eventually
who they
told.
were, but
Yes.
who knows?
Who knows if
or if
found
they
them.
would actually, if Bartley would have kept the chokehold on probably another 30 seconds,
it would have killed the doctor.
that would have killed the doctor, and then because there was no evidence there either. Everything was that part to be that long ago. They were, they had gloves, the hats. They did really good about not leaving anything behind.
Wow.
So that part was interesting.
So then the poor doctor had to go in and find his daughter.
Found her, and we got to be really close with the family after that because we felt like we owed them a little bit of gratitude because if without them, we may have never known.
No.
And it still took 4 months until we found out. But then their trial was, for some reason, in front of ours because they arrested them first on the Acker murder, and then they started building their case for ours with Bartley talking, and then some of them cracked a little bit.
So they told about your grandmother and grandfather. That's how it.
In the conversation when they were, Bartley was the weakest of the three, as far as mentally, just he was along for the ride. But so when they started, all right, who did this? Who did this? Who did this? The one thing he said was, when I was choking, when he said we had to kill him, they said, well, we did the last two. You have to do this one. And the detective was like, what was the last two? And he's like, I didn't say that.
So he kind of told on himself.
And he's like, well, what was the last two? And he said, well, the Morris, the Jackson County. He said, oh, you all were involved in that. And he said, yeah, they did that one. I was the lookout. And then the wheels really started turning there.
I was going to ask what the connection was. Because it's a pretty good story about the MOs and stuff and everything, which you learned those really later, kind of. But and my bet was somebody loose lips.
Well, it's like Tommy Linsells told on himself at the Texas murders about the little girl in Lexington.
Exactly.
So I guess they just.
If you're ever going to do one, do it by yourself. I mean, I guess you can never count on, because it happened.
Shut up.
They'd been up at the Catalina Hotel, which is still here on Nicholasville, right behind stuff. They'd done a lot of drugs and stuff up there. They'd been camping for 4 days when they ended up doing my grandparents, scoping everything out. But yeah, they'd run out a little bit of money, so they wanted more money for drugs. They picked up Sherry and another girl. So the girls went and bought the gloves and the hat, or the boggins that they wore, and then they went and did it, picked them up, and that's when they went on their spree. And then Sherry wanted something a little bit more, so they're like, well, let's go do Dr. Acker.
Okay.
And they dug into that part of it, and like I said, it's awful that it had to happen, but we're so thankful because who knows what would have happened afterwards.
It's like the stars have to align for
They
them
really
to make
do.
those statements. That's one of the criticisms I have of some of the people that do the true crime thing is they'll put there'll be somebody that has an idea who did a crime. They haven't been charged yet. And they'll put that name and the situation on blast. And I'm always like, we don't do that here because it reminds those people to stay low. I can't get people to understand that if you do that, you're jeopardizing the case. You need them to sort of start relaxing a little bit so that they'll slip like
They brag.
That's
it.
it.
They get comfortable.
That's it. But if you go to YouTube or you go somewhere and somebody goes, my God, David, you ought to listen to this podcast and they swear at you and maybe
they're getting close. They know that they know
that's
this.
It.
And,
well, then that just reminds me to go low and to shut up, stay off the radar.
Yep.
When really there's a thing to people who do these things, Mark. They don't have any remorse. Let's get that out of the picture. They don't.
We'll get into it with the trials.
Yeah,
that's most definitely.
They're devils and it's demons, and so they don't have a conscience to rub, but they're smart enough to shut up. So again, my point being is that you got to hope at some point they slip, that they brag, they tell somebody just like that, and especially if it's groups of shitheads, they get so comfortable.
Yeah.
And then, but there's no loyalty there either.
They want to start bragging about, I did this. And that started happening once they were put in jail.
That's it.
They
They
didn't do that. I did this. Don't let them take credit, or I was a part of this.
Yeah, exactly. Or I'm not running down for that. I might have done this. I might have sat on the car and waited, but
and then do this part.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you remember when you all got the phone call, or how you were informed that they had found these 3 people? Because you probably still didn't have a clue.
We knew who it was. Well, we had an idea when they started describing it. We didn't know the details because they hadn't told us, hey, it's Eb's son. We knew, they said, hey, there may be a connection because the murders were kind of similar. They tied them up kind of the same way, no forced entry, robbed people that the community knew, smaller communities, the community knew they had money, but we didn't have any idea it was there. So when they did make the arrest, even for the first couple weeks after that, but then I remember Detective Ron, I cannot remember his last name, I tried to look it up, called, I can remember his dad or Bobby, and said, we got him. And they said, what do you mean? He said, do you know Roger Epperson? Like, well, was that Eb's son? They're like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, we know him. And then everything started. It went, from that point, it went really fast.
Did you all already know the other 2 people?
No, just Epperson got him in. So it's Roger Dale Epperson, Benny Lee Hodge, and Donald T. Bartley. We'd never seen Bartley or Hodge before.
So he just kind of recruited them in.
They just all got running in drugs. And it just so happened, he said, hey, I know somebody where we can get some money. And they used him to get into the house. And everybody said, Hodge, to this day, if they would let me pull the switch, I'd be more glad to pull the switch. He would taunt us. He'd blow kisses at us in court during the trial. He'd hold his cuffs up and tell us if we was man enough to come do something to him, that he'd do it again.
And he was the lookout?
No, he was in there.
He was in there
with Epperson. Okay. Yeah, he was the one that killed Granny.
So they told what each of them did?
Yeah.
Eventually?
Well, we kind of figured it out, but yeah, and then he was the one that stabbed Tammy so many times and killed. He was probably the most brutal of them, but he ended up being the biggest coward because during the trials, him and Sherry had made a pledge that they were going to take cyanide if they were found guilty, and we actually found the cyanide pill on him, but he wouldn't take it. And then we'll get to that in the trials because they had sheets. One of the trials, it started out, we went in Jackson County. Of course, they wouldn't do it there, so they moved it to Laurel County. In the jail cell, they had handcuff keys for both of them. They were found with. They took the sheets and put them into a tie rope. They had pizza boxes. They had a TV. So there was a lot of stuff we found out once they were found guilty. They didn't tell us beforehand. And once they moved them to Eddyville, that was all stuff that was found in their cells.
Well, let's go to. So they're arrested. There's that first. I guess something kind of like a sigh of relief. Not a big one for you all. The idea that somebody.
There's. At least we know who to
some
point
answers.
It to.
That's
yeah,
it.
We had some answers.
Gotcha. Not the why though, right?
No, we didn't know why.
Yeah. So maybe start with that. With what was it like? Because it takes a while to get to trial. Longer today than back then. But
right.
What was it like waiting? Did you get frustrated? Did you hear that they had a hearing? And
we did. Yeah, so they would be. You have a lot of hearings. Let's put it. You had the preliminary hearing first, which in Jackson County is where it took place. We were treated more like criminals probably than they were. If you look at the newspapers and in the clippings, I can remember there was police everywhere. They were lined along the walls. They were lined behind them, trying to separate us from them. Not even hardly being able to see them. So you had that happen. Then they get change of venue because they said they were too well known. So you're going back seeing them again for that. And all this time they're looking at us like, ha ha ha! Look, look what we got you. This is what we did. And at that time, once the trial started, the first trial started in '86 for the Acker murder. So we were a part of it. Our family was there most of the time. I was in school still, so I didn't. In '87 is when we had our first trial for ours. I had graduated high school and started college in Richmond. So I was going back and forth from the trial dates in London to school and back and forth that way. So it was, again, another dose of reality. Then it was new, you didn't have internet, but you had newspapers, TV crews, and now it's a big story because it's this crime spree that they went running across, Kentucky, killing couples and younger lady. They had Lester Burns involved in it, which was a big time attorney. Mm-hmm. You had Vilsdorf, which was an attorney out of Pikeville that was representing one of them. So it became headline news every night.
Yeah.
What's going on here? What's going on here? And then no matter how much evidence you think you have, the scary thought is, what if they say no? What if they say they get away with it? And then some of the lies that were told on when they get up to talk, they didn't testify, but part of it and what their attorneys do, and they try to make you the bad guy. It was a lot. 2 years before we even got to really get our first sentence for them.
I don't think people see that but I know I saw it with my victims' families, is the fear that they have, the anxiety that they have. And there's no way I'm going to paint defense attorneys with a broad brush because there's so many of them that I respect quite a bit. But it's rough on a family to watch an attorney or attorneys do what they're supposed to do and advocate for somebody. That alone is tough. But that's the system.
That's right.
Now throw in there if the attorneys do add a little salt and a little punch, or they if they represent something in a way that people don't agree with. I'm not going to say that they lie, but that's hard to watch.
There was a lot of arrogance in this.
Yeah.
And not because, we're right and they're wrong, but it was, all right, you're all from a small hick town. We're going to be this. We're going to show you. And it became really personal. James Wiley Craft was our attorney. He had done the Acker case. We requested him to do our case. He ended up being, remember, he just passed away last year, mayor of in Letcher County. And so that's where he was from. But he had done that case as the Commonwealth attorney, so we had him on ours. And it became, between him and their attorneys, this all-out war almost. We got the death penalty in the Acker case. We didn't know for sure how long that would stay. There was some things we were worried about with the judge there. So we wanted to make sure, all right, we're going to get him for this.
So on the Acker case, did all of them receive the death sentence?
You had 2 death sentences in the Acker case, and the same thing. So Epperson and Hodge, on both cases, were given death. Mm-hmm. Bartley got life without parole, or life with possibility of parole in both cases. Turned state's evidence. And then Sherry received some time and testified in the Acker case, but testified in her first one, but not later. Gotcha. And that's one thing that's interesting about the court system. You think if someone testifies and there's a retrial or it comes back, they have to do it again. They don't.
No. The
testimony is good for one time and one time only. Now, you can read their testimony back, but sometimes that's not the same as the individual sitting there.
It's not as simple as people make, and that's Sherry Hamilton.
That's correct.
Yes, Hamilton.
Why did the one guy not get the death penalty?
For us, he turned state. I mean, that just without a doubt. If it hadn't been for him, it would have been really hard.
Yeah.
We had evidence, and we could place the motive. We knew why they were there, how they got in, but he provided some stuff that we probably never would have got. Yeah. Now, when the mom showed up with my grandma's ring on, during the trial, and that was really one of the first times we had seen her, that was a whole nother story, because then not that we had any doubt, because just how they acted when we saw them, we kind of knew what was going on. But yeah, when she showed up with the ring on, that was a whole.
Did she know it was your grandmother's ring?
Yeah, without
and showed up with it on.
Without a doubt.
Now, is Sherry still in jail, prison?
No, she's out. She got famous. She got on Oprah. She's traveled. She was on Dr. Phil back when Dr. Phil first came out.
Because of this?
All to do with the trial. When there was a book written about it, and I don't want to say good or bad. Darcy O'Brien wrote a book called A Dark and Bloody Ground. And it has a picture, the original had a picture of Tammy on the front with a knife through it and blood coming from it. And then in the book, it details Sherry and the whole crew, but Sherry, Hodge, Epperson, they're kind of Bonnie and Clyde style. and it gets into how they found out about Granny and Papaw's murder, and then some about their plan when they were in jail, how they're going to kill themselves and die together and never be apart. And so she went on a tour with Darcy or Mr. O'Brien, Oprah and all that, trying to promote the book to get that part of it.
I was going to ask what the interest would be in that, and that was it, just a book.
And basically she tried to play the battered woman syndrome with Oprah. Oh, he forced me to do this, and I'm trying to do better, and you're not supposed to hate, but I hate her.
No, but
it's just one of those things. If she walked by,
that's a super common defense, though,
mm-hmm.
and it'll be used by people who are 100% in.
Right.
But listen, if they didn't think of it before, a good attorney walk them through that too.
In a heartbeat.
And again, that's I can't criticize that piece, but they'll lie. I mean, that whole thing of I was forced, I didn't really want to. I had a couple like that. Lynetta White, there's two defendants on that one, and that was part of the pitch that one of them tried to use, is that he made me this, he made me that. And unfortunately, in that one, the jury didn't buy her story, and she got the same verdict as the guy did. But yeah, that's insult.
Now, is she still in Kentucky?
No. I don't know where I know she's not here.
Mm-hmm.
She's popped up on the radar back in our last retrial was in 2003. She popped back up in the radar for that, and she tried to reach out a few times to some of the family members, but we have.
Ooh, what did she want to
Why
talk to the
would
family?
she reach out?
Personal satisfaction, to gloat, to try to get some pity, wanting to thank you, which she didn't do anything for.
Yeah.
I mean, she was as much a part of the problem,
sure,
as they were. She didn't pull the trigger, but I mean, she was doing the drugs with them. She was instigating this part of it. We got to get more. We got to get more. Can we do more? Yeah. This is fun. Let's do this.
Was she one of them that you said went and got gloves and hats?
Yeah, she helped get some of the stuff for. She knew what she helped them play. She knew what they're
full on accomplice.
Yeah,
full on
100%.
Yeah, complicit in everything. So
100%.
Interesting. So yeah, but again, I kind of read that in talking to you, that waiting like that and then watching the maneuvering and. Every time that the attorneys go to the bench and you can't hear what they say.
There's nothing worse when you're sitting back there and even in our, on TV, you see them give these 10-minute opening speeches for the defense and then for the prosecuting. Nobody interrupts. Nobody says anything. In the first minute and a half, there were 17 objections to Mr. Kraft's opening statement.
Mm-hmm.
And so he couldn't get a word out. And then you see him run up to the counter and then, all right, we need the jury to step out. It took 4 days to see the jury in the first trial. And in the first trial went 11 days.
Mm-hmm.
Some were continuances or whatever. So you're like, golly, what are we doing? And then when they go back to deliberate, there's nothing worse.
Yeah.
It's just, you're like, all right, how long is it going to take? And, the rule is the quicker it can be good or it can be nothing, or the longer it goes, the worse it can be. Luckily, ours was fairly quick.
Yeah.
But it was one of those, you're like, all right, now what happened? Some of the things that's interesting we found, and I've talked to a couple of other people that's went through this, when they were found guilty, of course, we won the death penalty. They both agree, if you'll give us life, we'll tell you everything, the truth.
Okay, yeah, they try that too.
And we're like, no. And every trial that we've had 3 retrials, every trial, they've offered, well, we'll tell you what really happened, which now we know without a shadow of a doubt what happened.
Well, and it would be a lie.
Exactly. Why would we take
it
off?
That's it. I don't think I've heard
and
of that.
what does it
often.
change? Really nothing.
Nothing.
And the other guy,
Nothing.
you said, probably told the most of the truth.
Yeah, for you can piece together between what they tried to say happened and what he said happened and the evidence and what Dad saw. You can kind of piece together everything that
it speaks
the timeline,
for itself.
Because with my grandmother, they'd ripped the clock out of the wall, so we knew what time that had happened because it was the old-fashioned digital clocks everybody had, so you could see the time that stopped. The time of hearing the fire, what my Uncle Bobby thought was firecrackers, he knew about what time it was. He was out, so you could start piecing everything together to know.
Crazy. That's like a serial killer that tries the same thing where they'll say, well, if you let me live, I'll show you
Oh,
some
the
more.
more bodies, or
That
I'll get
didn't
you
work
this.
well for Ted Bundy or Tommy Lynn Sells or Resendez Ramirez. It's just the last two I know of. But it, and again, like you said, Wendy, what's it changes nothing.
Yeah, it doesn't bring them back.
Changes
It doesn't change
no,
it. So it's not even worth it to know
It was
more.
evil and it was
then
brutal.
I think you don't even probably want to know that you.
They get to gloat. It's almost like
Yes.
they get to relive
Yeah,
it in their
they're
mind
reliving
and
it
say,
and they're
"Watch,
proud.
I'm going to watch you hurt because
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to tell you." And even when we talked about doing this, it's never out of my mind. But now you start going back, okay, what was that day like?
Yeah.
What was this like? And I was sitting with my wife, we were talking about it, and she's like, I can't imagine. And I'm like, oh, you never will. And you hope nobody does. But the one thing that a lot of people forget about, 40 years is a long time. Most of the people that, nowadays, well, that happened forever ago. Who cares what happens to them?
No.
It's still as fresh sitting here now as it was that morning I got the phone call. I can feel the chills when I said, Grandpa said your grandparents have been murdered. What I felt that moment and the drive and seeing them, and then having to try to think what my dad saw.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he saw it, but then the other three, the main kids and their wives, and then now the grandchildren, that's a void we'll never get to fill.
Yeah.
No. And you made a good point about them and the giving them the ability to gloat and to brag and everything. One of the things that drives me crazy from people that just don't understand is they'll talk about, well, they should put them in prison, so they have to sit and think about what they do. They do.
They love it.
They love it.
Love it.
And they love it, and they relive it. A lot of them masturbate to it. I mean, this is what you're dealing with. It's not like they're sitting there sulking, saying, "I've ruined my life." That's why they would do it again if they got a chance.
Well, and they definitely aren't saying they're having remorse for what they did or what the family's
it
going
can't
through.
exist.
They don't care.
Yeah.
Well, and I always tell people, they said, well, how do you figure? And I said, all right, think about it. If you can't sleep at night, and I said, you're just sitting there, what happens? You run through everything you did that day over and over and over. So that's usually why you can't sleep. Well, when they're in the jail cell, there's nothing else for them to do. So they get to fantasize about, I did this, or I remember we walked in when I hit him that first time, how it felt.
That's it.
That's
Or
what
them
runs
begging
through
for
their
their
mind.
lives.
Yeah, just constantly over and over. When you take a Bible and ask a 68-year-old lady with one eye, are these 4-leaf clovers going to bring you luck? And then shoot twice. That there is nothing there.
No, and it's like in that book, I think from David Simon, Homicide, is that there's the top rules of homicide, and rule one is I think it's number one, is the guilty party always sleeps. And I found out, I used to share with Wendy that we'd have the holdover room before we interviewed people, or when we got them in the interview room, and I'm not kidding you, you had to wake them up. So that's back to what you said. You and I, if we had to take a life to defend ourselves or somebody we loved, it would change us forever. We're not wired for it. We would probably need all kinds of therapy and stuff. But they were tired, not because they were emotionally run down. It's because it doesn't bother them.
It's just,
I don't know how many, and you could ask all the people I work with and murder cops all over the country, how many people they've had to wake up or keep awake.
You even see on First 48 when you watch that, when
that's
they're
it.
waking,
Same thing,
they're
yes.
in there asleep and they're
That's
like,
it.
hey, wake up.
sound
Yeah.
asleep. And like within, I was in the military. You'll take a nap whenever you can. But
Yeah.
they go in and they're
Yes.
asleep. They shut the door and they're
That's it.
sleeping. And
Yeah.
it's-
Yes.
There's just no, and so that's an important thing because it's a small peeve of mine where in today's social media world where somebody will talk about a case and people will mitigate the behavior. I just saw one where a younger person stabbed a 14 or 15-year-old to death in Louisville, and I'll just describe this. And in his mugshot, his tongue is sticking out a little bit. I think it's because he thinks it's funny because I've met guys like that. But it was funny how people were, well, he's autistic. And I'd ask, I said, I've never known of autistic people that are capable of murder.
That's exactly
So two
right.
problems with that. You're guessing and you're insulting the shit out of people that are on the autism range. Stop making that. Because my number one comment is they'll say something and I'll like, or they might be evil.
Yeah.
That exist.
And it's
like
obvious,
a-
most of the people that say that's never had anything tragic in their life.
No, they've never
Because,
met anything
like with
that.
ours,
Yeah.
for Hodge to blow kisses, at me or at the time my wife during one of the retrials, or at my dad, or laugh at him, and come on, do something, mouthing it. There's nothing about that's sorry.
No.
they love it when they do get retrials or get to go out because that's a day out for them.
Sure.
Well, yeah, let's go there real quick before we dance away. You said 3 trials.
We've had three trials.
What if you can remember on so you have a trial, you get a conviction. What was reversed or sent back down for trial 2?
Hey, there's more to the story, so go download the next episode like the true crime fan that you are.
The Murder Police podcast is hosted by Wendy and David Lyons and was created to honor the lives of crime victims, so their names are never forgotten. It is produced, recorded, and edited by David Lyons. The Murder Police podcast can be found on your favorite Apple or Android podcast platform, as well as at murderpolicepodcast.com, where you will find show notes, transcripts, information about our presenters, and a link to the official Murder Police podcast merch store, where you can purchase a huge variety of Murder Police podcast swag. We are also on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, which is closed caption for those that are hearing impaired. Just search for the Murder Police podcast and you will find us. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe for more and give us 5 stars and a written review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcasts. Make sure you set your player to automatically download new episodes so you get the new ones as soon as they drop. And please tell your friends. Lock it down, Judy.